The chair scraped against the marble floor before Maya Ellison even reached the dining room, and the sound of it landed in her chest like a struck bell. She stood in the archway of the Han family's private dining hall, one hand still resting against the cold doorframe, and watched a stranger settle into the seat beside her husband as though it had always belonged to her. The woman was young, dressed in ivory silk that caught the chandelier light every time she moved, her dark hair swept into a knot secured with a jade pin Maya recognized because she had once been offered one just like it as a wedding gift from the same family jeweler. She placed her hand on Min Junhan's forearm with the casual ownership of someone repeating a familiar gesture, and he did not pull away. Maya's pulse spiked, but her feet did not move. 3 years of marriage into the Han family had taught her exactly how much a misstep cost in this house, and a scene in front of 12 members of Seoul's most dangerous bloodline was not a mistake she intended to make standing in a doorway. Maya. The voice belonged to Grandmother Han, seated at the head of the table in her customary black, her spine straight despite her 83 years, her eyes already fixed on the empty space where a wife's chair should have been.
Come in. Seat.
But there was nowhere to sit. The mistress occupied the seat directly beside Min Jun, the place Maya had held at every family dinner since the day she married into this house, and 12 pairs of eyes now turned toward her, waiting to see what she would do about it. Maya had married Min Junhan for reasons the tabloids never got right. It was not the money, though there was more of it than she had known existed before meeting him. It was not even the danger, though she had understood exactly what kind of family she was marrying into from the very first dinner, when a man at the far end of the table had excused himself mid-meal and never returned, and no one at that table had so much as paused their conversation. She had married him because the first time he looked at her, across a hospital waiting room where she worked as a trauma nurse, and he sat bleeding from a wound he refused to explain, he had looked at her like she was the only steady thing in a world built entirely on collapsing structures. That had been 4 years ago. Tonight, standing in the doorway of his family's dining hall while a stranger wore her seat like a crown, Maya thought about that hospital waiting room and wondered exactly when the steadiness had started running in only one direction. There seems to be some confusion about the seating, Maya said, keeping her voice level, the same voice she used when a trauma victim's family needed calm more than answers. That's my chair. The young woman looked up at her with an expression so carefully arranged it might have taken years to perfect, equal parts innocence and challenge. Oh, she said, soft and apologetic in a way that fooled absolutely no one at that table. I didn't realize there was assigned seating. Min Jun didn't say anything. Min Jun said nothing at all. He sat with his jaw tight and his gaze fixed somewhere on the tablecloth, a man who commanded rooms full of soldiers with a single word and could not, apparently, summon one sentence to correct the woman touching his arm in front of his wife and his grandmother. Maya felt something in her chest go very cold and very still, the particular stillness she had learned to summon in emergency rooms when panic would only cost lives. She was aware of every eye at that table, of the uncles and cousins and lieutenants who had spent 3 years deciding whether the American nurse belonged in this family, all of them now watching to see if tonight was the night that question finally answered itself. She had 2 seconds to decide how this story would be told tomorrow, in every corner of this house and every corner of Min Jun's organization. She chose composure. I'll take the seat beside grandmother tonight, then, Maya said, and crossed the room without another glance at the woman in ivory silk, settling into the chair at the old woman's right hand as though she had planned it all along. But Grandmother Han was not finished, and the old woman's eyes had not left the mistress's face since Maya first spoke. What is your name? Grandmother Han said. Her voice was quiet, the way a blade is quiet before it moves. Yuna, the young woman said, some of her composure slipping now that the room's true authority had turned its attention on her.
Yuna cho.
I'm a friend of Min Jun's. A friend, Grandmother Han repeated, and let the word sit in the air long enough for its inadequacy to become obvious to everyone at the table. You are sitting in the seat of the wife of my grandson, wearing a hairpin that belongs to this family, touching him at a dinner where his actual wife stands unseated in her own home. Tell me again what kind of friend you are, and choose your words very carefully this time. The silence that followed had weight, the specific density of a room where everyone present understood exactly what was happening except, perhaps, the man at the center of it, who still had not lifted his eyes from the tablecloth. Maya sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, and let herself feel, for the first time since walking through that archway, the full shape of her own humiliation. She had built a life inside this family through sheer competence and careful patience, had learned the hierarchy of every cousin and lieutenant, had earned the old woman's respect one quiet act of loyalty at a time. She had done everything right. And still she was the one standing in doorways while another woman wore her chair. "Grandmother," Min-jun said finally, his voice low, and something in it made Maya's stomach twist, because it did not sound like the voice of a man about to defend her. It sounded like the voice of a man managing a delicate situation, careful and diplomatic, the exact tone he used with rival factions he did not yet trust enough to threaten. "This isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," Grandmother Han said, and now her voice rose, sharp enough that two of the younger cousins actually flinched in their seats. "This is your family table, Min-jun Han. This is where loyalty is decided and betrayal is punished. Do not tell me it is not the place. Tell me instead why this woman is touching your arm as though she is the right, and why your wife has been standing in a doorway for the last 2 minutes waiting for you to notice." Maya watched her husband's face for something, anything, some flicker of the man who had once sat bleeding in a hospital chair and looked at her like she was the only thing keeping the world from tilting off its axis. What she found instead was a careful, practiced blankness, the same face he wore during business negotiations, and the recognition of it landed harder than any accusation could have. "Yuna is helping coordinate the shipment negotiations with the Osaka contacts," Min-jun said. "She's been staying at the estate this week for security reasons." "Security reasons," Grandmother Han said, and the disbelief in her voice could have stripped paint from the walls. "She is sitting in your wife's chair with her hand on your arm, and you call it security. Do you think I raised a fool, Min-jun? Do you think 83 years in this family taught me nothing about the difference between security and a woman warming a bed she has no right to?" The dining hall had gone utterly silent now, every fork stilled, every conversation abandoned, 12 members of the Han family watching the scene unfold with the particular attention people reserve for moments they know they will be asked to recount later. Maya felt the heat crawling up her neck, humiliation twisting into something sharper, something closer to fury, though decades of training in emergency medicine kept her spine straight and her hands folded and her expression unreadable. Yuna's composure had fully abandoned her now, her hand finally sliding off Min-jun's arm as though it had suddenly grown too hot to touch. "Grandmother Han, I promise you, nothing improper has happened. I would never disrespect this family." "You are disrespecting this family right now," Grandmother Han said, "simply by continuing to sit in that chair while I am speaking to you. Get up." Yuna did not move, frozen in the particular paralysis of someone who has never before been directly confronted by consequences. "I said," Grandmother Han repeated, and this time her voice cracked across the room like a slammed door, loud enough that even the household staff, waiting near the kitchen entrance, visibly startled. "Get up." Yuna rose from the chair so fast it nearly toppled backward, her face draining of color, and stood there in the center of the room with nowhere to go, and every eye in the house fixed on her. The staff along the far wall had gone as still as the family at the table, none of them daring to move a serving dish or refill a single glass, while Grandmother Han's voice still hung in the air. Maya was aware of every detail in the room with the same heightened clarity she carried into a trauma bay during a mass casualty call, the chandelier light too bright, the scrape of Yuna's chair legs against marble still echoing faintly in her ears, her own pulse steady now in a way that surprised her. Maya felt something shift inside her own chest, watching the old woman defend a claim Maya herself had not been given the chance to make. It was not comfort exactly. It was something closer to clarity, the sudden sharp understanding that whatever this dinner had started as, it had become something else entirely, a reckoning that had been building far longer than the last 5 minutes suggested. "Now," Grandmother Han said, turning her attention fully back to her grandson, and her voice dropped again into that quiet, blade-sharp register that Maya had learned to fear more than any shout. "You will tell this table exactly what has been happening in this house while I was in Busan visiting your aunt, and you will tell it now, in front of everyone, because I suspect several people at this table already know, and I am tired of being the last to learn the truth in my own home." Min Jun's jaw worked once, twice, and for the first time since Maya had entered the room, she watched real fear move behind his eyes. Not fear of any rival, not fear of any federal investigation or territory dispute, but fear of the small, fierce woman at the head of the table who had raised him after his own mother died and who had never once, in 28 years, been wrong about anything that mattered inside these walls. "It isn't what it looks like," Min Jun said, and the words came out smaller than anything Maya had ever heard him say. The powerful, controlled boss of the Han organization suddenly sounding like a boy caught in a lie he had not prepared an answer for. "Then tell me what it looks like," Grandmother Han said. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like my grandson has humiliated his wife at her own family table, in front of people who are supposed to respect her because they respect him, and I would very much like to hear the version of this story, where that is not exactly what happened." Maya sat perfectly still through the silence that followed, watching her husband search for words he did not have, and something inside her that had been slowly closing over the last several months, some quiet, patient hope that things would simply resolve themselves if she stayed steady long enough, finally and completely shut. She had spent 3 years being the calm one, the one who smoothed tensions between rival cousins at family gatherings, the one who sat quietly through territory negotiations she did not fully understand because her husband asked her to be present as a show of unity. The one who learned Korean business etiquette well enough to never embarrass him in front of his associates, who studied his family's history and rituals until she could navigate them better than some of the cousins who had grown up inside them. She had done all of that, and tonight, she had walked into her own home to find another woman sitting in her chair while her husband said nothing. "I don't need you to explain anything to the table," Maya said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected, cutting cleanly through the tension the way a scalpel cuts through tissue that has been waiting too long to be opened. "I need you to explain it to me. Alone. After this dinner is finished." Every head at the table turned toward her now, surprise evident on more than one face, because in 3 years of family dinners, Maya Ellison Han had never once raised her voice or contradicted her husband in front of his family. She had always understood, instinctively, the particular currency of respect this family traded in, and had spent every dinner carefully earning her share of it. Tonight, she spent all of it at once. "Maya," Min Jun said, and there was something in his voice now that sounded almost like relief, as though her anger were easier to face than his grandmother's disappointment. "Not now," Maya said. "You had every opportunity tonight to say something. To correct her when she sat down. To defend me when your grandmother asked you a direct question. You said nothing 3 separate times, in front of your entire family. I am not interested in an explanation performed for an audience. I want the truth, and I want it when there is no one else in the room to soften how it sounds." Grandmother Han's eyes moved between her grandson and his wife with something that might have been approval, though her expression remained as unreadable as ever. "The girl has more spine than you gave her credit for, Min Jun," she said. "I told you that when you married her. I told you a woman who runs into danger for a living instead of away from it would not spend her life quietly accepting whatever scraps of respect you decided to give her. It appears I was correct." Yuna, still standing awkwardly in the center of the room with nowhere to sit and nowhere to look, finally found her voice again, though it came out thin and defensive. "I think I should go." "Yes," Grandmother Han said, without even glancing in her direction. "You should. Someone will see you to the gate. Do not return to this estate." "Grandmother," Min Jun started, and the old woman's gaze snapped to him with a force that silenced him instantly. "Do not," she said. "Do not tell me this is business, Min Jun. I have run this family's business side by side with your grandfather, and then alone after he was gone, for longer than you have been alive. I know exactly what business looks like, and it does not look like a woman's hand on your arm at a family dinner. It does not look like her wearing family jewelry. And it certainly does not look like my grandson's silence while his wife stands humiliated in a doorway. You will walk Yuna to her car yourself, and then you will come back to this table, and you will sit across from your wife, and you will begin explaining, because I am not finished, and neither is she. The dinner resumed in fractured pieces after that, the remaining family members picking at food no one had appetite for anymore, conversation limited to careful, quiet exchanges that skirted around the enormous silence at the center of the table, where Maya sat with her back straight and her hands folded, waiting. Min-Jun returned 11 minutes later, his expression carved from the same careful stillness he wore during negotiations with men who wanted him dead, and took the seat directly across from Maya rather than beside her, as though even he understood he had not earned the right to sit close tonight. I need everyone to give us the room, Maya said, and it was not a request, and after a moment's hesitation, Grandmother Han rose first, gesturing sharply for the rest of the family to follow, until the dining hall emptied out and left only Maya and her husband facing each other across a table set for a dinner that had never actually been eaten.
How long? Maya said.
Min-Jun did not pretend to misunderstand the question. 3 months. It started as business. The Osaka negotiations were falling apart, and Yuna's family has connections there that I needed. It was never supposed to become anything else. But it did. Yes, Min-Jun said, and the honesty of it, delivered flatly and without excuse, hurt more than any lie could have. It did. Maya felt the last remaining fragment of hope she had been carrying, unacknowledged even to herself, finally break apart completely. She had married a dangerous man with open eyes, had accepted the violence and the secrecy and the constant careful navigation of a world built on loyalty and consequence, because she believed that whatever else this family required of her, her husband's loyalty to her specifically was not negotiable. Tonight had proven otherwise. You let another woman sit in my seat, in front of your entire family, and you said nothing, Maya said. That is the part one cannot get past, Min-Jun. Not the affair, though God knows that alone should be enough. It's that when the moment came to choose, publicly, which woman belonged at your side, you chose silence. And silence is still a choice. I panicked, Min-Jun said. I didn't know how to fix it without making it worse. You didn't try to fix anything, Maya said. You sat there and let your grandmother do the work you should have done the second Yuna touched your arm. I don't need you to fix this, Min-Jun. I've spent 3 years learning how to survive inside a family that eats its weak members alive, and I did it without you rescuing me even once. I don't need rescuing now either. I need to know whether you actually want a marriage, or whether you want a wife who is convenient and quiet while you decide who else gets to sit beside you. Min-Jun was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, something in his voice had changed, stripped down past the careful diplomatic register he used with everyone else in his life. I've spent my entire adult life being told that feeling anything too deeply is a weakness the wrong people can use against me. My father taught me that. It is the reason my mother is dead, because she loved him openly and their enemies used that love as a door straight into this family. I learned to keep everyone at a careful distance because distance is safety. I did that with you too without meaning to, and I let something happen with Yuna because it required nothing of me. It was easy in the specific way that everything with you has never been easy, because everything with you actually matters. That is not an apology, Maya said. That is an explanation for why you hurt me. Those are different things. I know, Min-Jun said. I am not finished.
I am sorry, Maya.
Not for the negotiations, not for needing Yuna's family connections. I am sorry that I let a woman who required nothing of me sit in the chair that belongs to the only person in this house who has ever asked me to actually be present instead of simply performing control. I am sorry I chose the easier silence tonight instead of the harder truth. You do not deserve a husband who only finds his courage when his grandmother forces it out of him. Maya studied his face across the table, searching for the practiced diplomatic blankness she had learned to distrust over the last hour, and found instead something rawer, something that looked almost like the man from the hospital waiting room 4 years ago, bleeding and frightened and looking at her like she was the only steady thing in his collapsing world. I am not going to pretend tonight did not happen, Maya said. I am not going to sit at that table again and act as though nothing changed. If we are going to survive this, you do not get to manage me the way you manage rival factions. You do not get to decide what I need to know and what stays comfortably hidden. I understand, Min-jun said. I don't think you do, Maya said. Not yet. But I intend to make sure you learn. The door to the dining hall opened before Min-jun could respond, and Grandmother Han stepped back inside, her sharp eyes moving between the two of them with the particular assessment of a woman who had spent decades reading rooms full of dangerous men and had never once been wrong about what she found there. Well, the old woman said, has my grandson finally remembered how to speak honestly to his wife, or do I need to sit down again and remind him a second time? He's getting there, Maya said, and something in the dry precision of her tone startled a short, surprised laugh out of the old woman, the first genuinely warm sound Maya had heard from her all evening. Good, Grandmother Han said, settling into the chair beside Maya, the same chair Maya herself had claimed earlier when there had been nowhere else to sit. Because I did not survive 50 years in this family, buried 2 husbands and outlived 3 rival organizations, just to watch my grandson throw away the one woman in this house who has never once needed protecting. You saved his life once, did you not? In that hospital, before any of this began. I stabilized a gunshot wound and refused to report it to the police, Maya said. He calls that saving his life. I call it doing my job and making a very poor decision about who to fall in love with afterward. A poor decision that built an entire wing of the Busan Children's Hospital your husband funds anonymously, Grandmother Han said, and negotiated peace between 2 territories that had been at war for a decade before you married into this family, simply by being the one person at every table too honest to lie to either side. Do not sell yourself short, Maya Ellison Han. You are not a convenient wife. You are the reason this family has survived as well as it has these last 3 years, and I suspect my grandson knows that better than anyone, even when he forgets to act like it. Min-jun looked at his grandmother, then at Maya, and something settled in his expression, a decision arriving slowly but completely. I want to earn back what I lost tonight, he said. Not with words. I know words are cheap after what happened. I want the chance to show you, over time, that the silence tonight was the last time I choose the easy thing over you. That will take longer than one conversation, Maya said. I know, Min-jun said. I am not asking for one conversation to fix it. I am asking for the chance to try. Maya sat with that for a long moment, feeling the weight of the last hour settle into something she could actually examine rather than simply survive. She thought of the hospital waiting room 4 years ago, of the quiet, terrified man bleeding through a jacket he refused to remove, of the version of him that had existed before power and fear taught him distance was safety. She thought of 3 years spent earning a place in this family through patience and competence, only to watch it nearly stripped away in one careless dinner because her husband forgot, for one crucial hour, that loyalty required more than convenience. I'm not leaving, Maya said finally. But I am not going back to being quietly patient either. If you want this marriage to survive what happened tonight, you do not get to manage me anymore. You include me, completely, in everything that touches this family, this business, and this house. No more careful distance disguised as protection. You start treating me like your equal instead of your convenient, quiet wife, or there will not be a second chance after this one. Agreed, Min-jun said, without hesitation, and something in the immediacy of it told Maya he understood, finally, exactly how close he had come to losing something he could not simply purchase or negotiate back. There was one more thing Maya needed before she could let the night close over the wound it had opened. The Osaka connections, she said. The reason you told your grandmother Yuna was here. Was any of that true, or was the business simply the door she used to get into this house? Min-jun's jaw tightened, and for a moment Maya thought he might reach for the same careful diplomatic distance he had used all evening. Instead he exhaled, slow and deliberate, and gave her the truth without softening it. Some of it was true. Yuna's uncle does hold territory near the Osaka docks, and the negotiations were real. But I have run this family long enough to know when someone is offering more than they're asking for in return. I let the ambiguity stand because it was convenient. I told myself I would deal with it later. Later never came until tonight forced it. Then let me deal with it now, Maya said, and something in her voice made Min-jun go very still. If her uncle's territory matters to this family's business, I want to know exactly what she reported back to him every night she stayed under this roof. A woman who touches another man's wedding ring finger while pretending to discuss shipping routes is not only interested in shipping routes. It took her most of the following morning, 3 cups of coffee gone cold on her desk, and a quiet conversation with the head of household security, a broad-shouldered man named Tae-sung who had never once doubted where his loyalty belonged, to confirm what her instincts had already told her at that table. Yuna Cho was not simply a woman who had overstepped a professional boundary. She was the niece of a man who had spent 2 years trying to find a crack in the Han family's foundation wide enough to slide a blade through, and the affair, however genuine Min Jun's guilt over it might have been, had also been engineered from the other side as a way to gather exactly the kind of intimate household intelligence that no outsider could otherwise obtain. Maya laid the findings out on the dining table that evening, the same table where she had been humiliated 3 weeks earlier, and watched her husband's expression harden into something cold and absolute as he read through the timeline she had assembled, the pattern of Yuna's questions about security rotations, about which lieutenants traveled with Min Jun and which stayed behind, about the exact nights the estate ran with a reduced guard during quarterly audits. She was never just careless with her hand on my arm, Min Jun said quietly, understanding arriving the way it always did in this family, too late and all at once. She was mapping this house. I don't think she planned to fall for you, Maya said. I think that was the one part of the assignment that got away from her family's control. But it doesn't change what she was sent here to do, or what she gave her uncle every time you let her stay another night without asking why she needed to. Min Jun's hands had gone very still on the table, the particular stillness Maya recognized now as the calm before he made a decision that would not be reversed. You found this in one morning. My own security division missed it for 3 months. Your security division was looking for men with guns, Maya said. I was looking for a woman who wanted something and was patient enough to wait for it. Those are different kinds of threats, and this family has always been better prepared for the first kind than the second. Grandmother Han watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction, then rose from her chair with the deliberate slowness of a woman who had outlived every storm this family had ever weathered and intended to outlive several more. Good, she said.
Now.
Someone tell the kitchen to bring out fresh food, because everything on this table has gone cold, and I refuse to end tonight on an empty stomach after finally getting my grandson to behave like the man I raised him to be. 3 weeks later, the Han family gathered again for the monthly dinner, and this time, when Maya walked through the archway into the dining hall, her seat beside Min Jun sat empty and waiting, exactly where it belonged. He rose when she entered, an old-fashioned courtesy he had never before extended at a family dinner, and pulled her chair out himself in front of every cousin and lieutenant at that table, a small, deliberate gesture that said more than any speech could have. The uncle's operation near the Osaka docks had quietly folded 2 weeks earlier, its shipping contracts absorbed by associates loyal to the Han family, its influence in the region reduced to nothing worth mentioning at any future dinner. No one at the table needed the details explained to them. In this family, consequences arrived without announcement, and the empty chair where Yuna might once have sat was explanation enough for anyone paying attention. What had changed, more than territory or contracts, was the way Min Jun carried himself in rooms that used to belong only to him. He no longer made decisions about his wife's place in this family, in his business, in his own house, without her sitting directly across from him first. He had learned, in the weeks since that dinner, that the woman who once stabilized a stranger's gunshot wound in a hospital hallway was the same woman capable of unraveling an infiltration his entire security division had missed for months, and that the distance he had once mistaken for protection had only ever made both of them weaker. Grandmother Han watched the exchange from the head of the table, a faint, satisfied smile touching her mouth as Maya settled into her rightful seat, and Min Jun's hand found hers beneath the tablecloth, steady and certain in a way it had not been in months. To the family, Grandmother Han said, raising her glass, her sharp eyes moving deliberately to Maya. And to the woman strong enough to make sure it remembers what loyalty actually means. Maya lifted her own glass, meeting her husband's eyes across the table, and understood that whatever else this family and this dangerous world required of her, she had finally claimed something no one would ever again try to take without a fight. Her seat, her place, her voice in a house that had once expected her to simply be grateful for the space it allowed her. She had learned that in this family, silence was never neutral, and she intended never to be silent again. If Maya's story hit you right in the chest, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next dangerous, slow-burning drama waiting for you right here. Drop a comment and tell me the exact moment you wanted to stand up and cheer, whether it was grandmother's command to get up or Maya finally demanding the truth. And give this video a like if you believe every woman deserves a family and a table willing to fight for her seat. New stories are coming soon, so stay close, because in this world, the quiet ones are always the most dangerous to underestimate.